Okay, well, good afternoon, President Lee, guests and fellow Rotarians. It's my first day back in Wellington for just over 3 weeks. I've actually been managing a farm about 30 kilometres to the west of Napier for that time. An extremely dry farm with about 400 acres. And for those people that know of me, you're probably thinking, what on earth was he doing on a farm? Well, I have to say that, one of the things I was doing was actually getting to know New Zealand better. It was a gorgeous location, and I've been in New Zealand now for just over 3 years, coming up to 4. And I have to say, seeing that part of the country for an extremely long length of time has certainly cemented my love of the country. I think you've got an outstanding country, and one which offers many opportunities for people who want to have a go. I was born in Griffithstown near Pontypool in South Wales many years ago. It's another beautiful country who've got a similar passion for rugby. And for those of you who have never actually experienced a game day in Cardiff, I do encourage you to do so if you get the chance. There is only one caveat though. We do expect you to sing. My upbringing, whilst privileged in terms of experiences, it was not privileged in terms of wealth. My father, although Welsh, decided to join the Church of England as a vicar. And so I spent my first few years moving around from parish to parish while he was a curate, i.e. training how to do the real job of giving the blessings and baptising and saying goodbye at the funeral. He got his first parish up in the northwest of England in an area called the Back of Skiddaw. And the Back of Skiddaw is traditional John Peel country, which is where traditional fox hunting emanates from. And so I was lucky enough to be brought up in that area of the world for my formative years. It's a hard world, hard rural world where people graft hard to make a living. But I have to say that it was one which I would never look back on. I spent my years from the age of 8 working on a farm. For most of my free time when I wasn't debunking of school. Now, whilst my father was Church of England, he was high church, and so he believed in the fact that actually the whole of Catholicism should be taught to us, a result of which that both I and my 2 younger sisters were sent off to a Roman Catholic convent school. And so we had this slight sort of thing, okay, this is what you do in one church, this isn't what you do in the other. But at the end of the day, I have to say, in all my years in business, I have never come across anybody as fearsome as the nuns at that convent school. My mother's Scottish, and she became a scientist within the Agricultural, Fisheries and Food Department, and that subsequently led her to seeing, firsthand the devastating experiences that are suffered when foot and mouth hits the hills of Cumbria. And there was many a time when we used to get the phone call from Mum saying, right, I'm locked down on the farm, I can't come back, I'll be here for a few days while they sort of deal with the consequences. And that's, I have to say, seeing that in the late 60s and early 70s, and it really, everybody thought it had gone until the early 2000s when a combination of both BSE and foot and mouth came in. And I can tell you now the Cumbrian economy has still not recovered from it. It's a devastating disease, and for an area that was already grafting to make a living, it was devastating to the economy and the community. My educational years were not the most prosperous in terms of actual qualifications, but I have to say I did excel at my rugby, so much so that I ended up playing pretty high standard rugby in the Welsh League for a number of years, and continued to play serious rugby up until my sort of late 30s. My working life at some point had to start, and it was really by coincidence that I sort of got a job through a contact as an assistant surveyor in a company of auctioneers, commercial agents and land agents. It was a fantastic time, but I have to say it was in the early 80s, a result of which I saw at first hand the consequences of an economy as it went downhill. I was mainly employed in the commercial department, and for the first couple of years of my working life, all I seemed to do was to go around help closing businesses, holding fire sales which produced actually no benefit to any creditors or anybody. It was an awful time, and it was one of the times when I saw actually China coming online. We were closing down various steel mills in the Midlands, And we had one production line which had only been in place for about 5 years. And we put it out for tender, and surprisingly enough, we got a company from China wanting to come and buy a steel mill from the Midlands. It was quite strange. And they came along and they actually painted and numbered every single nut and bolt. They removed it, and within 6 months they sent us photographs of it working 24/7 in China. And it's amazing, if you've got a drive to do something, what you can actually achieve. Following on from that, I then moved into finance. I sort of went across to the Building Society world, where I spent 8 years with the Leeds Permanent Building Society, 5 of them as a manager of a large branch in Nottingham. I was fully qualified under the Financial Services Act to give all financial advice, including the provision of pensions. At the time, it was the finance world was going through a lot of change, however, and the sort of in thing was to try and sell pension mortgages. And for those who've ever come across them, they're one of the worst things you can ever do. The idea is that you save for your pension, and then you take a big hit by paying your mortgage at the time you want to take it out. Not the best form of advice. So I decided it was time to move on, to go and do something different. At that stage of my career, I'd already spent 10 years in the Reserve Forces as an officer within the Light Division, and so I decided that I should go and do the real thing for a while. So I stepped up in my early 30s and went and joined the regular army. Having done a spell there, I then came out of that and decided to go and do something completely different, and decided to become involved in the timber industry in Latvia. And why not? If you've dealt with sort of infighting in Northern Ireland and various places, dealing with the mafia in Latvia wasn't too bad as long as you paid them off every month. But that was an interesting time. The market had literally just opened, and it was a time of developing new supplies for the UK market. They were cheap supplies. In some respects, actually, we probably helped kill off the UK timber industry. So looking backwards, probably wasn't the wisest move by all of us doing that. It just brought the price down, and in the end, various sawmills collapsed in the UK. However, I did set up quite a good business myself. The Latvians only liked converting pine. They didn't like oak. They thought it was just worthy of burning in great big piles. And so I set up a business there and then imported oak parquet flooring into the UK. I then moved on and decided, as the timber industry was beginning to sort of move gently downwards, that actually I ought to get into some sort of new form of industry, one that's quite modern and moving on. So I joined the Orange France Telecom group and decided to get into telecommunications. It was booming at the time. It was the best thing to do. And I went in there to run one of their corporate arms in the UK and worked my way up through various positions. And then in 2002, all of a sudden, the market decided to collapse and we were 82 billion euros in debt. So I then spent the next sort of 6 years doing transformation, various cost-cutting and outsourcing across Europe and Africa. After that, I was then headhunted by Alcatel-Lucent as their strategic director for deals across the globe in services. And that brought me to New Zealand in 2011, a result of which I then stepped up to take over the running of that company here in New Zealand and across the Pacific Islands. However, in the telco industry, as we all know, it continues to be challenged, and Alcatel-Lucent needed to do further consolidation. So after much transformation in New Zealand, we decided to roll it up into Australia last year. At that stage, I decided to get off the bandwagon, a result of which I'm now pondering my next move. My intention, however, is to stay in New Zealand. I've written various white papers about how New Zealand can move forward with the benefit of technology and other various industries. I believe that Wellington has a solid future. I think we just need to come together more in terms of taking our policies forward. And along with certain aspects, I think, which were raised and were touched on earlier around the fact, Rotary itself, well, we as a club are facing our 100th anniversary. I think we have some challenges in terms of where some of the Rotary clubs are going and where we as an organisation are going at times. And that will take a great deal of input and thought to take us in the right direction. In the meantime, I thank Peter Cornish for touching base at one of those marvellous breakfasts that Peter Cullen runs, and for bringing me along to Rotary. I've never had the time to commit to anything like this because of my travels. And ultimately, I did 20 years in the Reserve Forces in the UK, so my time was taken up elsewhere. But I look forward to working with all of you, either individually or in collaboration, in terms of producing a better community. Thank you.